All right. Is there anyone else that we need in this meeting besides Mike Fenton? I mean, we'll start without him if he's our only guy, but I know this is in his award, and he was interested in the issue. Since I checked with him about 2:00 and he said he'd be here, so let's assume he'll jump on in a minute. And Robert, do you want to, so we don't take too much of anybody's time, you want to summarize the situation here for us, please?
Yeah, we're just asking for, well, first an appropriation order, and then after the appropriation order, if it's approved, the order of taking for the projects on St. James Ave and Carew Street. It consists of 13 permanent partial takings, 49 temporary easements, 8 permanent easements over portions located on St. James Ave, St. James Boulevard, Carew, and Fordham Streets. The total amount is $271,900. I'm sorry. Yeah.
271,900.
Yeah.
Don't be giving my money away, Robert.
Don't be giving Chris's money away.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a project. Chris, you want to give us just a quick description of the project and the timing?
Sure. Right now, per Mass DOT, the project is scheduled to go out to bid April 15th. On St. James Avenue, we are going from Merida Street to Ames, St. James Boulevard from Carew to Fordham, and on Carew Street from St. James to Hobart, and for a total length of about 4,200 feet of reconstruction. Both intersections, St. James and St. James and Carew, the intersections will be reconstructed with new traffic signals and as well as pedestrian access, pedestrian signals in both locations. Excuse me, and new sidewalks along the entire stretch of all of those roadway lengths that I talked about. The project in total will be bid by Mass DOT, will be inspected by Mass DOT, is right now at $9.3 million. Do not have an exact start date, but with an April bid, we are anticipating starting later this year, September or so, out in the field.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Thanks. And just a question on it. Is it driven by safety, by technology, by what would you say the overall?
This one is 100% safety. We meet with Mass DOT 2 or 3 times a year, and we talk about crash reports, and the PVPC along with MassDOT put out, you'll see it in the paper sometimes, about the most dangerous intersections in the state, and really it goes to crash locations. And this is what is called a crash cluster for a number of reasons. Number one, you got 2 intersections that are antiquated close to each other. You have especially St. James in front of Big Y, where there is vague traffic patterns, to say the least, in some cases. So it all started with safety. And when the project was initiated by Mass DOT actually, in a lot of these cases, Mass DOT will ask us to initiate the project and begin the design. This is one of those where Mass DOT actually took the project over, designed it, so we didn't have any expense related to the design side, but we follow it through the entire same process. And it started back in, I believe, early 2018. And I want to say we had 4 or 5 public hearings throughout the course of the project, all done through the East Springfield Civic Association and Kathy Brown and the group there. So it was initiated through safety simply because of accidents in that area.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to go around and get some opening statements by everybody. Reverend Watson, would you like to hear your concerns, or what your concerns were and where they stand at this point?
I'll start off by prefacing my remarks with the fact that we're essentially, as a pastor of a church, we're dealing with lay people, and we know that there are experts like Chris and others with respect to this project who certainly have the in-depth knowledge about it. But on the surface, our church was concerned about several things. One, we wanted to really express the fact that we have a major investment in our church. And when we heard how much we would receive in terms of compensation, $1,675, we thought at first it was a typo. We were saying, what's wrong with this picture? And so we wanted to get some answers. I'm thankful that Attorney Shuchuk sent out the appropriate correspondence. We did meet with a city engineer, Emmanuel Russell, and we had the good fortune of sitting down with Chris at the January 9th hearing. So we have a broader perspective, but we certainly, and in fact, some of my officers spoke as well. We just had a concern that we were being lowballed, and that the appraiser did not really take into consideration, the significant investment we've put in our church in the last 20 years. It's been over $1 million. And with the city exercising a temporary 5-year eminent domain policy, again, dealing with lay people, some were saying that there's a potential of us being disrupted at any point in the 5-year cycle. We know now that as we met with the city engineer, as we talked with Chris, that the actual work on Canaan's property is going to be for a much shorter period of time. But in layman's calculations, the church looked at $1,675, considered that it's a 5-year temporary eminent domain, and they were saying that comes to, in effect, $335 per year. I wanted to point that out first of all. But we have a broader perspective now, and particularly after some of the meetings we had. But even, I would say this to Robert, after receiving that report, the restricted appraisal report, there's still just a few questions that came up, and I'll say this and be ready to respond later to some other things. First of all, our property is part of the appraisal. Our property at overall square footage of 20,747 was really assessed with analysis with sales of surrounding residences. Some would maybe 5,000 or 6,000 square foot. And we're saying there's no comparison. Even how the amount that the city has assessed our property at, 512,900. It's so much greater than any of those residences that they use for sales comparison data. The other thing we noted is that, of course, we did receive the data on both Canaan and Fresh Anointing. And even there, we want Fresh Anointing to get, as a sister church, to get all of the compensation they can. But even there's a distinction in overall square footage, as well as the difference in the appraisal values. And what we noted was that the appraiser came down to the same assessment of $5 per square foot. We could have had the Taj Mahal, and we're concerned that the appraised value for the square footage being compensated would have been $5. That, it was just a cookie cutter situation. And so we just questioned whether in reality, even though we know this project will not provide for us the compensation we thought would be appropriate, we just questioned whether the highest and best use was considered with Canaan, particularly since they didn't do any type of interior appraisal of, improvements on the property. And we just feel that our property is really not comparable with anything, in that immediate area. So we just have a question with that. And probably the other question would be, we saw on the chart, and we're thankful for Chris providing that chart for us on the compensation for various residences and commercial enterprises. And we see that some were receiving double, there were double entries. They were receiving double compensation. And that just raised a question as well. So overall, I think that is it in a nutshell. And of course, I could elaborate as necessary, but I did want to make those points.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. That's everybody. We should hear everybody's concerns in order to get.
If I may, very quickly, it's because of the zoning. That changed it. Like, for example, the Big Y, it's I think it's more than $5 a square foot. I think it's like $7.50 because of the zoning. You're
I don't know.
as a residence.
I don't, Robert, just hold a second.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just explain a little bit what you mean by it's because of the zoning. You mean the amount paid?
Yeah, so they are zoned as a residential, and then as opposed to Big Y, which is zoned as a business. So the square footage it makes more money per square foot for like a business as opposed to a standard zoned residence.
So the church, Reverend Watson's church would be receiving compensation along the lines of a residential house or nearby kind of thing, the same kind of basis.
Yeah, they put it in the they have a calculation, and just because of the zone, it's zoned as residential, not business.
Okay, and who's they?
The appraisers. They have the whole calculations that are way too complicated for me to even understand. But the appraisers, and then the reviewer, there's a review appraiser who they review the appraiser to make sure that no mistakes are made, and they both agree that that's the value of the property. And so it's not just the value of the property, it's just the value of like the the sidewalk. Not the whole property that they're looking at the value of that. They're looking at the value of that sidewalk.
So let me just get straight. So Chris has a project to get done, and we know there's impacts on properties, et cetera. So we hire appraisers, and they go around and try to appraise the specific impact on each property.
Yes.
Correct.
And they have some sort of algorithms or categories.
Yeah. So all the like properties are treated the same.
Gotcha.
The same amount. Like, for example, $5 per square foot, and I want to say Big Y, it's like $7.50 per square foot, but I can double check that.
Well, that would be, in my mind, that would be one way to do it, by zoning, but
I'm sorry, there's many other factors that go into it, but that's just one that the appraiser Jason Fenlinson mentioned.
Okay. Well, do we have Reverend Watson? You bring up points that I can't address, but I can try to get them addressed. And have you spoken to Counselor Fenton about this?
I did. I did get to speak with him. I appreciated that he came over to speak to me at the hearing on January 9th. And so we did have the conversation. He did speak to me in general about some things that Chris went into greater detail about, and that but of course he was just speaking in general terms. So Mike really, took time for that, and we know that he's checked in with us on other occasions, and I appreciate the fact that he took time for that conversation. And I know that the engineer and Chris Ignoli have the detailed information, the professional information. So, but long story short, we did hear from Mike Fenton.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a couple hands up in the queue here. I was going to go to Counselor, I don't know who went up first, but Counselor Whitfield is a member of the committee, so I was coming around to her anyway. So why don't we start with Counselor Whitfield with her questions, and then Counselor Hurst after that.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. I think the only question that I have is what Reverend Watson meant by double payment. You said some organizations or properties receive double payment.
Well, some of them, so the same property, for example, some will have a temporary easement and a permanent easement, so they get paid for both the temporary easement and the permanent easement on the same property.
Were they
Is what I believe.
amount, like double payments of the same amount?
No, just different. So for example, one big property will have like a permanent partial taking and for a small portion of a square foot, a couple square feet, and then another temporary easement for a longer section like a sidewalk. So you got to pay them for the sidewalk that they're temporarily easing, and then the permanent partial taking, you would pay them for that as well.
And the
And
property.
excuse me, Counselor Whitfield?
Sure.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing to that as well. And I know I spoke to Reverend Watson about this. For example, the property right next to him, there's two properties, there's two banks,
Mhm.
and their payment is about double his because their property, and it's two separate payments because it's two separate locations. They have a frontage on Carew Street there where we're doing a sidewalk, and then they also have a frontage on St. James Avenue where we're doing a sidewalk. So they have double the amount of impact. So it shows up as two payments, but it's basically we have to pay by each one of the property locations. So there's I think I showed him, well, his was 1,300 and the other one was 60 or 2,600, excuse me, because these properties just happen to have two impacts, one on each frontage.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Hold on, Counselor. I forgot what I was gonna say. So you said that like some of the properties you use temporarily and then you give the property back? Or
Right,
some-
there's, you want me to explain it, Robert?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize.
There's three types of, I'm gonna use the word easement / takings. There are a handful of locations where we are physically taking property and owning it in the end. And that's like at corners where we gotta cut corners back a little bit. And those are, I think there's 8 of them there. Then we have partial, partial takings. Let me just make sure I got it right. Then we have temporary easements, which is what is on the Reverend's property, where we are giving him a new driveway ramp and new sidewalk. And in order to construct that work is technically inside the city's right of way. But what we do is we take a 5-foot easement behind the property line so that to do the work, we can, be on the property and be able to replace the sidewalk and that sort of things on that. We are also doing permanent easements. And I think the only permanent easements we have are for placement of signs after the construction is complete, where on some of the people's properties, not on this one, there is, I think it's 8 square feet where to put a sign in that's going to be behind the sidewalk. That person gets compensated for having a permanent easement for signage on their property.
So what is Reverend Watson's category?
He is a temporary construction easement. So once the work is basically done, and I know he had mentioned it before, and I'm not sure when you have done, Counselor, Mass DOT allows us to do 2 types of easements just from a time standpoint, either a 3-year or a 5-year. And if we do a 3-year, we sometimes bump into construction not being 100% complete when the 3-year is done. So we always get a 5-year easement. However, when this, I know the Reverend was concerned about it, I'm guessing that the impact to his property is something that's like 2-3 weeks total. because, contractor's gonna come, he's gonna rip out a sidewalk, he's probably gonna do 3 or 4 in a row, frame them up, compact them. He's always gonna have access to the property and get it done. And then get the work done, and then we're complete and, for access onto his property. They're still working on the roadway. The easement stays in place, and I know one of the questions he asked, there's no construction equipment stored on his property. People can't access anything on his property other than in that 5 feet that is identified. So we do the 5 years, and when construction is complete, all the easements are extinguished. So, let's say 8 months later, something happens on the property and somebody has to go on it, and we had to do work, we or anybody else, you have to obtain new easements because it's for a different construction project. But that's kind of the general overview. His is a temporary construction easement. So when it's done, that land, we're not taking any property from him. It's just for access during construction.
And he gets paid for that access for that time?
Correct. He's getting paid at the cost per square footage of the impact to his property. And which is why I said, like, his property impact is on Carew Street. His property next to him fronts both sides, and I think there's 2 banks there. They both front both sides. So it's like they have kind of I'm going to say double the impact from a square footage standpoint on the project.
Okay.
Thank you. Are you all set, Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Hurst?
So first of all, thank you, Reverend Watson, for being here. One of the reasons why I voted to send this to committee or moved to send this to committee was because I wasn't able to hear firsthand from you. I know you had given some testimony at Public Speak Out, but I wanted to hear from you in terms of what this impact meant to your parishioners. And moving forward, Reverend Watson, until you and your parishioners are satisfied, I will not be voting in favor of this project, considering what it is that you all do for our community and the city of Springfield as a whole. Chris, I do understand the double payments. That makes perfect sense to me. I guess, Attorney Suchuk, the issue that I would have is whether this particular appraiser is culturally competent. And the only reason why I ask that is because the idea that you would classify the impact to a resident in the same way that you would classify an impact to a church is someone who does not necessarily understand the value of the church in our community, and more importantly, the value of the Black church to our community. And it seems to me like while you may not compare its value to a business like Big Y, although I would argue that it might be even more valuable, certainly from my standpoint, what I do know is that it probably shouldn't be compared in the same category as the residents. And so it would seem to me that folks ought to find somewhere in between, if not valuing it at the same impact of a Big Y. So I don't know where the appraiser is or who appraised it, but I'd love to ask those individuals some of the questions that I propose here today, because it just, that doesn't add up. And it just seems like more questions ought to be asked of the appraiser.
Thanks, Counselor Hurst. Let me just make a comment. Attorney Suchuk, is there any more testimony that you have about the appraisal process? Because what I feel so far is that it's an incomplete explanation. And is Kathy Brack around? She gets involved in a lot of these things.
No, she's not. And I mean, like I said, I don't really understand the appraisal process. I can't explain it as well as I'm sure the appraiser can, but that was my general understanding of it.
So basically what you're saying is that and I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to understand it. It seems like a low amount to me, $1,675 or whatever. Is there, let me just understand, is there, is that just for the inconvenience of this going on? There's no damage to any, Chris, there's no, the property of the church is not permanently changed by this or anything. It's just, this is an inconvenience, payment for the inconvenience.
Correct. Yeah, they're getting a new sidewalk.
They're getting a new sidewalk. Okay.
That's about as simple as I can explain it. To getting a new sidewalk. New sidewalk and driveway ramp.
New sidewalk and driveway ramp. And are
Right.
all the people that are getting, some sort of payment, same kind of deal, they're getting a new sidewalk or they're getting something unique to their property?
Yes. Yeah, and I'm just looking through now, 1,300, 1,600, 1,500, 1,600. Some cases, the signed ones are 1,000 or 100. Some of them are, hundreds of dollars. We're just looking through, a couple of them are 2,000, 2,100.
And are those, Chris, are those businesses or houses or,
It's all a mix because it's the way that they're listed in order. It's by, just as you move down the street, they each get an easement number. So I'm just kind of looking through them now. We're having major impacts on Big Y's property because along their front, that whole parcel is divided into, what is it, like 6 different parcels, Robert? Something like that?
Yeah, it's
6
something
or
like
7
that.
different parcels.
Yeah.
And we're doing a brand new entrance there. We're physically taking property from them. So obviously their impacts are much bigger. But yeah, I'm just looking through on the residential side, temporary easements, $200, $450, $275, $350, $1,400. So they're all in that range. And these are, I was actually a little shocked at how, because we have so many that the overall number, usually when we do projects like this, they're in the range of, $200,000 or so. We're going to be doing the X, which I anticipate to probably be, the exact same type of thing, for new sidewalk construction, as well as, with all the roadway work as well.
And the same type of numbers will be along the same
Actually,
line.
I think the X has more, doesn't it, Robert?
Yeah, that's probably twice as many. So
Yeah,
not excited for that. But
yeah.
You mean more total number is 400,000 instead of 200,000? Is that what you mean, or more properties or
It's
more?
both. I'm guessing it's probably going to be double the amount of properties and double the amount of damages.
Okay, Counselor Whitfield is, her hand is up, so I'm gonna go back to Counselor Whitfield and Counselor Whitfield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't realize that the church property was valued like a residential property. Definitely they have more going on and more people exiting and entering the premises. The driveway and the sidewalk, Reverend Watson, is that where your parking takes place?
Certainly that driveway, absolutely. That's the largest of our 2. We have relatively small parking areas, and that driveway is the entrance to the larger of the 2. So yes, in a nutshell, it is an access route, to our parking spaces.
What are we doing for parking for the church? Is there any idea? I mean, they have weekly things going on. Sunday is very important. That's not a question for you, Reverend Watson. That's for the administration. are we going to, what are we gonna do for their parking situation? Because if you know where they're located, definitely can't really park on the street too much.
No, this has no impact at all to the parking.
Well,
zero.
they can still use the ramp to go into their
Oh, yeah.
their driveway, so
Oh,
none
yeah.
of that would be.
Yeah, and as I mentioned to Reverend Watson at the time, the only, I'm gonna say day or so that it will be inaccessible will probably be the day they pour the concrete, which, you know, the Mass DOT and my people will coordinate up with people, you know, hey, what's the good day? Is it Monday, Tuesday? Definitely not probably a Thursday if you're having something that evening. So that's the only time that there will be that impact where, you know, there may be that one day where you can't get in there. But other than that, it, you know, 99.9% of the time during construction, that's going to be just the way that it is today.
Was there a reason that the appraiser wasn't invited to the meeting, or we just normally don't invite appraisers?
Well, first of all, this is the first time I've ever had to have a subcommittee meeting about appraisals.
Yeah, it just seems weird that an appraisal would be residential and commercial would kind of like be the same.
Well, it's the way the property's zoned.
How's the property zone?
It's zoned residential, right?
Yeah,
Robert?
it's in residential,
Yeah,
so they
it's
have
zoned
rules that they have to follow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's residential. But it is a church. I mean, we could look at it and
Yeah.
tell, and if he, you know, even used the CIS or went there to do a physical appraisal, you can see what it is. So no
Yeah.
matter what it's zoned. Yeah, I think I agree with Counselor Hurst on that. And I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't no interruptions to the church, because as you know, in our community, you know, that's where we worship and that's where we fellowship and we hold a lot of events and meetings in our churches. So I just wanted to make sure, but I also want to make sure that, you know, I'm not picking on Big Y, but I'm a little bit tired of Big Y. Getting city funds in excess of like other organizations in the city of Springfield, especially minority owned organizations. And so, you know, that the amount that I seen that Big Y is getting, I now understand that we're taking some of the property. And so I kind of understand that a little bit better. I didn't know all these, there were like 3 different layers to it, but I still want us to consider that it is an inconvenience and there's a lot of parishioners that goes to the church, and you know, we just got to be mindful when we're looking at appraisals that we take all those factors into consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Counselor Whitfield. So I texted Counselor Fenton a few minutes ago. I haven't seen him join. He gave me an affirmative, yes, he would be at the meeting at 2. And I had the impression that we had resolved whatever issue there is, and I don't have that impression now that I'm in the meeting. And so that doesn't mean we can't get to the finish line, but I have to, you know, just ask. I know we're confused on, and I'm, you know, on the whole classification of a church as residence, because I know it is. I'm not questioning that it is zoned that way, but there is a difference between a residence and a church. So that part is news to me. Haven't really been at this level in these appraisal things over time. Chris, have you in your other traffic projects, which I've probably been involved in a few, have you encountered this church classification thing before?
Yep.
Where, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just finished a project over on Industry Robbins and Cottage Street, where adjacent to that intersection was a church there. And, you know, we did the exact same appraisal process. It was the exact same thing. They got a new 2 driveway ramps, 2 sidewalks, and the only issue we had to deal with was coordination during construction. And that property, I believe, was zoned commercial because it was a restaurant, I believe, before a long time ago. And we'll be dealing with the same thing on the X with Trinity Church, and when we did South End, or excuse me, when we did the North End project, there's a number of properties along there that are churches as well. And from an appraisal standpoint, it goes by zoning and assessed value of the property and the temporary use of the property. My biggest argument that I've ever had over the years was when we did Boston Road with Macy's, that, you know, they were trying to say that their property was worth, you know, $500 million. So that the, you know, 500 square feet that we were impacting during construction, they could get a ton of money. But historically, we haven't run into any issues related to use type. It's really based upon zoning, assessed value, and type of impact, whether we're dealing with a permanent easement, and the only way, or permanent easement, temporary easement, construction easement. And then it also has to do with the type of impact and the amount as well. And when we're looking at it from the standpoint of a sidewalk, you know, it would, you know, if it is not voted on or not wanting to be passed because of this property, Mass DOT will just take the sidewalk out and proceed.
Explain that again. So there's a sidewalk by Reverend Watson's church,
Right.
which is going to be improved as a result of this project, and
Right.
for which the inconvenience of going through that, the inconvenience factor is paid for by the $1,675.
Correct. Yeah.
But there's no other, when they need to get in and out of, when the people from the church need to get in and out of the parking lot, et cetera, access egress, there's no other negative impact to that.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And if we couldn't come to a resolution on this somehow, it would just get exempt. I mean, it would just, the project would go
Well,
on.
if it is voted, if the appropriation is voted down, the project's dead.
The whole project.
The whole project's dead.
Okay. And that's on Monday's agenda.
That's on
been-
Monday's agenda. Yeah.
And we set this meeting up. President Letterman set this up because we thought we could, you know, a committee meeting would resolve this. I don't know who else except Councilor Fenton. If he talked to somebody, I haven't talked to him directly, but I did hear that we thought, in fact, that night at the committee meeting, he, you know, Reverend Watson, you don't need to divulge private conversations or anything, but I had the impression that Councilor Fenton had spoken with you in the hallway or something or other. I think you said it earlier in this meeting. Did you reach some sort of agreement with him, or did you have a meeting of the minds or not?
I would say closer to a meeting of the minds. I do just want to acknowledge that I want to affirm what Councilor Hurst and Whitfield emphasized in terms of, you know, maybe the layman's, for us at the church, layman's logic that the church should be assessed, evaluated, considered, you know, according to a different criterion than residences. But if it's zoned that way, if there's the logic of how the city is run and how it's done its zoning, we're not, you know, I don't know if we would look to hold up a project based on questioning and challenging the zoning regulations. For us, the important thing was to be heard, to have us express our point of view as a church. And I believe anyone who, just as Councilor Hurst and Whitfield have pointed out, anyone who knows just the impact of the church, particularly the Black church in the community, and in our case, the investment we've put in our church, I think we were more than justified in speaking out on this issue. But we're not looking to go to the mat on this. We're not looking to fight tooth and nail. I appreciate the fact that we had a chance to speak with Emmanuel Russell and Chris and certainly Mike Fenton. So for us, it was important to be heard. And this may be something that the city may face in the future with respect to other projects like this. I would think that we're not the only ones in the city who feels that we should exercise our voice and to seek equity. But with all that I've heard, under the circumstances, I believe that I can go back to the church, to the officers and members, and essentially spell out what I'm hearing here and from what I've had in the individual meetings. And I think the church, they may roll their eyes, but I believe that they will accept this as basically par for the course. But any one of them probably would have spoken in a way that Councilor Hurst or Whitfield did, in saying, well, we are a church and we're doing something, in a different category than a residence. And that should be taken into consideration. But I'm prepared to release this situation with respect to Canaan. We feel that we have been heard. We had our opportunity to speak at the hearing. And I'm thankful for the chance to be on this Zoom meeting. And we're in no ways looking to, fight to the last man and you're on this hill and hold up the project. That has not been, our objective. It's not something I want to do. And so I would be prepared as pastor of Canaan Baptist Church of Christ to yield on this matter, having essentially expressed what I did, and to hear that echoed from some of the counselors on this call.
Yeah, and I didn't say it in exactly the same way as Councilor Hurst and Councilor Whitfield, but I certainly did question. It was my first experience with this type of thing, not my first time approving one of these things, not with the numbers there, but I've never been in a conversation at this detail level before where, and I understand your point. I understand Councilor Hurst and Councilor Whitfield's points. I'm not sure what else we can do about it in this meeting. I'm open to taking suggestions if someone else has an idea for the meeting. Otherwise, I'm inclined to close the meeting in a few minutes. I would,
The only other thing I wanted to add, Counselor, I mentioned it to Reverend Watson, that from a just a pure cash standpoint, that there is a procedure from a legal standpoint of, I'll use the word fighting it, or of requesting more money, and there is a procedure, and it's kind of set up the way that if you're looking for a tax abatement, you get your check, you cash your check, and then you go through a process that may or may not result in additional compensation. And I mentioned that to him, and Robert, you may be able to have more details on that, but there is a process in place. Now, I'm going to probably say every project we do after the case, I always get contacted by certain people that say, hey, I don't think I got enough money for whatever reason. Bay and Berkshire. We did Bay and Berkshire, and we actually had a resident who bought the property. What was it, like a month after the resident got the check? Yeah, a resident, somebody got a check because they were being impacted almost the exact same way that the Reverend is with his sidewalk. The previous owner took the money and ran, and then the new guy's there, and all of a sudden they're digging on his property. And of course, they never told the new owner that this project was happening. So we deal with that all the time. And then there is legal processes that property owners can follow as well.
Yeah. So basically, if they accept the check, they can still petition the court. The only tricky thing is, like, you can get your own appraisal. And if you petition the court, if the court finds that it was worth more, then we would pay you more. But if the court finds out it's worth less, then you have to pay, the overpayment. So it's kind of it's like gambling, I guess.
I see. But I was just saying, I'm prepared to close out on in terms of my comments. All things considered, as Pastor Keenan, I'm prepared to yield at this point, and we're relinquishing any concerns or complaints, so that as far as we're concerned, we won't be an obstacle going forward. But the important thing is that we feel that we've been heard, and it was important that we be heard. And I can certainly affirm that with my congregation when I speak to them again, that I hate to put it this way, but this may be one of those situations where you can't fight City Hall. So we'll, but I am not looking for us to be an obstacle or hindrance in consideration of this project going forward. We've said our piece, and we'll leave it at that. And I do believe I can speak for the church in that regard.
Mr. Chair,
All right, pardon me?
Mr. Chair, my hand's been raised for a while, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you see it.
I'm sorry. My apologies. Go right ahead, Councilor Hurst.
That's quite all right. I just want to say that, for the record, it's fundamentally and systemically wrong in terms of what is happening right now. And so, Reverend Watson, I appreciate you bringing it to light. What I don't want to see happen, Chris and Attorney Suchuk, is that this comes up again in another road project. It sounds to me like the other one that you are going to do or that you've done previously, the other church was in a commercial district, so they got more. And I guess, what happens if you're a resident, a residential property in a commercial district zoned that is zoned commercial? Do you get more then, right? Is it just sort of the luck of the draw? And if so, why does it have to continue to be that way? And why can we not figure things out moving forward? I appreciate the fact that Reverend Watson is not ready to go to the mat on this one, but I think that's part of the problem that we oftentimes have. We don't go to the mat, and then you have a whole lot of other folks down the line who end up suffering because we don't go to the mat. And I think he raises some very valid concerns that my hope can be addressed later on down the line. The question that I would have is that just because it's appraised at a certain price, is there anything legally that says we can't give them more? I know for the Friendlies, when we were taking that particular property, we gave them more than the appraised value. Is there anything that states that we can't give them more just on our own accord as a city?
To the best of my knowledge, the answer is no, unless we are taking an entire property. And I dealt with that once. We did the Bicentennial Project where I had a person, we were taking his entire property, and he was arguing over not necessarily the value of the property, but what the value of the property could be based upon development type of thing. And where the only other thing that I know of, and Robert, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that if we start taking property, for example, on what Reverend Watson's property, say we had to physically take 2,000 square feet, just to make up a number, and it left his parcel either substandard zoning wise or severely restricted any sort of future development or parking like that, yeah, then that gets into a negotiation, but not on a temporary construction easement.
Okay, I'd love to see that law, attorney. If you could send that over to me, just so I can peruse it. If not for, excuse me, Monday, then in the future. And it just seems to me that it shouldn't be the luck of the draw, and we ought to come up with a better way in which we appraise these properties, and we ought to be very clear with the appraiser that it just based off of zoning doesn't
it's based off of a lot of other factors. So, but I'm sorry.
Not just zoning.
Fair enough. It sounds like zoning is one of them, and it sounds like the reason why we're in the position that we're in now, based off of my understanding of what you conveyed, is because of zoning, especially as it relates to this church. Otherwise, they would be at $7.
The church is getting 25 at the same amount. Both churches are getting the same amount per square foot. So they're just so you know.
No, I understand that the churches are getting the same amount, as they should. That makes sense to me. But the fact that they're getting the same amount in comparison to a residential property doesn't make sense to me. And it ought not make sense to the appraiser either. Other than that they're factoring the zoning, they're using the zoning as their primary factor in assessment or in the appraisal. So anyhow, I won't drag this on any further, but something needs to be done in the future.
So Robert, thanks, Councilor Hurst. Robert, if you could take these questions, you've heard them all, back to the law department and just see what you can tell us on Monday, whether, are you planning to attend the meeting Monday night?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so if we don't talk during the day on Monday, maybe you could have some results of whatever analysis you're able to do with Kathy Breck or John Payne or whomever.
I can also talk to the appraiser.
And talk to the appraiser, of course.
And they could probably, they're happy to explain it. He was, they're very good, and they answer a lot of questions that anyone has of them. So.
Okay, good. All right, and Reverend Watson.
Yes.
All our dealings 20 years ago and Step Up Springfield, you were reasonable then and you're reasonable now, and appreciate working with you, and I appreciate your comments. But we will, as Councilor Hurst has suggested and Councilor Whitfield, we got to look into this a little bit more at a minimum. And so we have, it sounds like Robert can do that. I will follow up with Mike, and I'm sure Mike will help in that. Mike, being a lawyer, may have his own perspective on it, may have some knowledge, independent knowledge on it. Chris, is there anything else from your standpoint? Have you said what you need to say today?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I need to add at this point.
Okay, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Whitfield, anything else?
I just want to add that we don't want to hold up the beautification of the area either. Since Reverend Watson did concede, I will vote for this because it's my neighborhood where I live, and I know how bad it is over there. I live right up the street from Big Y and the church, like a minute away, and these improvements are needed. And so while I think that we need to research doing a better job in the future, it's still going to make improvements to that area, and I certainly want to see them done. So I appreciate you, Reverend Watson, coming, using your voice and making us even aware of this, because I had no idea how these properties were appraised before your comments and you come in here and us getting the explanation. I didn't even know there were 3 levels. And so it's like a great learning experience for me, but I will vote in favor of this on Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Whitfield. I wasn't going to ask.
I will make a motion that we that we vote in favor. Can I do that?
Of course, yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to do that or not.
Yes, I will make a motion that we support. I don't know what it's called, the easements, the levels. I don't know, whatever this is, that we support it. And so we can get this road project done in the neighborhood that I live in, that Councilor Fenton lives in, that the church is in, because we do need help and we do need better roads and for our traffic in the area. Especially, we have some new buildings that's going up that's probably going to increase the traffic in the area, and so these improvements are definitely needed. So I make a motion that we support moving forward with this.
Okay, thank you for doing that, and I will vote with you and support it as well. 2 votes. And our 3rd member of the committee is Councilor Govan. I don't believe she's been in this meeting, so I guess she wasn't able to make it. So that will carry. I think everybody had a chance to make a final comment. Appreciate everybody's honesty and openness with this. And
Council
Reverend
Allen,
Watson.
Council Allen, just very quickly, can I just ask a question of Attorney Sushak? Can you confirm that the land standards for taking land are based on whether or not they're based on city law or whether they're based on state law? And just have that prepared for Monday as well, because that will address the issue of what we as a city can do moving forward. As you have mentioned, Chris mentioned, you're going to have multiple churches on Sumner Avenue. And is this something that the city council can do? Or is this something that is based in state law? Simple as that. That's all I need. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor Edwards. Anybody else? Last comments? Otherwise, all right. Thank you, everybody. Not as easy an issue as we thought, but I think we worked through it. Appreciate everybody and have a great night.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.